then yeah, we'll start back up right at the 2:30 mark. So
awesome. Thanks, Teddy.
Hey, Benya.
Hi, Teresa. Good to see you.
Good to see you. How's the wedding plans coming along?
Good. 47 days.
Oh, let's count down. Good for you. Happy for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Bernadine. I love those brown leather seats. You're cruising in style. Get a full tour. Bernadine.
I said I'm right across from the cute little pocket park here in downtown Chisholm.
Oh, awesome. Nice.
Yeah, we got some nice public free Wi-Fi here on Main Street in Chisholm.
Oh, that is awesome.
Hi, Carter. Good. You're looking good. I'll
Bernadine, it's so great to see your face. Thank you for saying that.
You're gonna try to make a good impression on us, huh?
That's all I ever do, Bernadine. Thank you.
Well, you had me with hello, Carter.
All right, so it's 2:30. Let's go ahead and get started. So, welcome back everybody from the break, and getting ready to kick off our second presentation for today. This is an update to the American Connection Corps. We had Benya on before to give us an update on the program itself, but there's been some tremendous progress being done, so I'm excited to hear about the presentation. So with that, Benya, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Teddy, and thank you to the task force for having us. I know we had a chance to chat together, I think, way back in the winter. So thank you for bringing us back in here. And I think this time we'll also be able to share some more stories in depth in the field as well, and really be able to paint a picture of what the American Connection Corps has done this past year. And what we hope to do in the future too. So I just want to kind of give an overlay of what we'll be covering during our time together here. We've got a lot of different speakers coming in. For those who are new to the American Connection Corps, let me start by introducing myself. I'm Benny Krause. I'm one of the co-founders of Lead for America. We're a national nonprofit that began with the mission of saying we want to support young leaders in returning and reinvesting back into the places they call home. And so we kicked off with a fellowship program, a hometown fellowship program that brought young people, embedded them into public institutions in their hometowns to tackle community challenges. And we started working together with Land O'Lakes this past year to pilot what is called the American Connection Corps. And so it began as a pilot of 50 fellows serving across 16 states that were tackling the digital divide. So that went from broadband infrastructure development to digital inclusion and affordability and access, and also broadband adoption. So wide-ranging spectrum, and I'm proud to say also as a Minnesotan that we had quite a few, highest concentration of ACC fellows here in this state, and we'll be hearing from two of our fellows, and we'll go on a geographic tour of Otter Tail County and Redwood County. And before we begin and dive into the fellow stories, we are also very thankful of the partners that came together to help make this happen, and particularly Land O'Lakes, and we also have Santo Cruz too from CentraCare sharing also a little bit about why he got involved. So the arc of today's conversation, I want to kick us off here, but I'll pass to my colleague Gareth from Land O'Lakes to share a little bit about how this partnership came to be. We'll then pass it on to two of our fellows to share their stories in the field. Santo Cruz coming in also to share about CentraCare's involvement in this, and Gareth and myself to just kind of share where we're hoping to go next from the momentum of this past year. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Gareth. And thanks for coming in here as well.
No worries, no worries. Um, to this entire task force, thank you first and foremost for hosting us. I haven't met a majority of you all, so let me introduce myself. My name is Garrett Hubbard. I've been with Land O'Lakes for approximately 7 years. Um, and recently, I want to say almost a year ago, I was fortunate enough to really join the government relations team here. And I work extremely closely with some talented individuals like Benya at LFA to really bring this project to life. And, as this task force knows all too well, the issue of broadband connectivity to the daily lives of every American and to the overall competitiveness of our country. Over the past 2 years, especially here in Minnesota, we all have quickly resolved that the digital and quality connectivity is no longer a luxury item, but rather a prerequisite to engaging in this developing and digital world. This became glaringly apparent nearly 3 years ago when our Land O'Lakes CEO, Beth Ford, traveled across the country meeting with our employers and members, and as she wanted to really gain a better understanding of the overarching challenges and opportunities throughout rural America. As we all know, those challenges are enormous, ranging from the educational achievement gap, disparities in healthcare outcomes, closing hospitals, crumbling main streets, lack of access to credit, lack of fresh food across America's heartland, amongst many others. But as we really start looking at these challenges, one of the common denominators that we heard throughout all of our conversations was just digital connectivity. And we have a digital divide that we really need to address. So in 2020, with the global pandemic driving many of our daily activities online, our team, our enterprise really sprung into action, aiming to really close that digital divide by convening and leading through our American Connection project. That effort initially included alongside Land O'Lakes and other member retail owners. We started offering free and public Wi-Fi access to local communities as a short-term solution for broadband access. Other organizations joined us in this effort, and we are now reaching over 3,000 locations in over 49 states. And that's easily be able to kind of find and access all of those through a searchable Wi-Fi map. Now, this is a short-term solution, but it makes all the difference if we can help even one Minnesotan family. We also used our convening power for advocacy, and last summer we launched the American Connection Project Policy Coalition, a group that is now including over 175 major companies, trade associations, organizations, and they include stakeholders from various sectors of our economy, ranging from agriculture, education, energy, healthcare, technology. We want to be a resource to really help ensure that this historic investment is implemented efficiently and really closes that digital divide across communities all across the country. So really through our collective actions, we were able to really gather really early on a lot of great insights along this journey. But one key insight that we all learned incredibly early and incredibly fast is that the fact that many small communities across the country, and especially here in Minnesota, just simply don't have the capacity to leverage these opportunities, the technical assistance to solve their digital connectivity challenges just on their own. And our local communities and towns really needed some help. So as Benjamin mentioned earlier, that's why we recently launched, really a year ago, with LFA, we launched the American Connection Corps. And I want you all to think of the ACC as a boots on the ground effort to really bolster local internet connectivity, which in conjunction with Lead for America is really funded through the support of many, many partners, including CentraCare, which is here on the call with us today. This program deploys 50 fellows to partner with local public serving institutions in their hometowns, really focus specifically on projects related to connectivity and digital inclusion. Our connectivity work and the fellowships are serving as really amazing proof points as we look to the next Farm Bill, legislation, and other legislative mechanisms that really serve as really prime space for us to really develop further our broadband points. We hope that you take some of these learnings and apply some of these areas to a lot of parts of your areas, including our ability to really focus on enhancing rural vitality and really unlock the economic potential of these rural areas. So in closing, I'm excited. I'm beyond excited, more so, that this task force really gets to hear and learn from two of our amazing partners, really two of our amazing ACC fellows, and including CentraCare, as they really share their success stories and key insights throughout this entire journey. Thanks, Benya, and I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Gareth. And with that, I think a beautiful introduction. I'm going to pass it off to our two fellows, one of our two fellows, Carter Grupp, calling in from Otter Tail County, and he's just been doing some extraordinary work with Amy Baldwin and the county staff there. So, Carter, over to you. I know you've got some slides to paint the picture as well.
Yeah, but before we get into that, I would like to preface my segment here by letting you guys know that our building's under some construction. If you hear hammering in the background, it's because we're hard at work. I would like to say thank you to the task force for having us today, and thank you to partners in the American Connection Core project. It is this type of platform and these partnerships that will help further these initiatives in the past, and it takes a group to build a whole. I'm joined by my colleague Patrick Gary, who's calling from Redwood County. Patrick's in a very similar position as I am. I am an American Connection Core fellow working in conjunction with the Otter Tail County Community Development Agency on digital equity, digital literacy, and broadband infrastructure related planning and programming. I have some slides that I have prepared that can help you get a glimpse of what my day-to-day service includes and some of the work that we are proud to share with you. All right, can everybody see my screen here?
Yeah, you're good.
Yep.
All right. Yep. So I like to tell people that there's two components to infrastructure. There's physical infrastructure and there's social infrastructure. Physical infrastructure is really your backbone. It has to do with fiber optic technology, DSL technology, and fixed wireless and remote services for broadband. Obviously, the Minnesota State programs are focused on fiber optic technology, and we recognize that this is supportive of the bandwidth that we would like to achieve with our ambitious goals into the future. On your screen, you'll see an application that I've designed on ArcGIS, which is really helpful for infrastructure planning. We have our 3 layers for those of you who aren't familiar in red, purple, and green, which codify the bandwidth available in those specific targeted areas. That's codified by the legislature in 2014. And I apologize, there's no legend on this document, but those layers that look like lines throughout the project, those are ACAM layers. That's an FCC auction available at the federal level for telecommunication providers to apply and build to those areas. You might notice some dots on your screen. So what I did was I aggregated the data set that we obtained from the Range Association Municipal School District, which highlighted bandwidth speeds amongst people who took our speed test. We were able to, the larger the dot, the better the speed. The lower the dot, the smaller the dot is, the worse the bandwidth is. And this is an extremely helpful tool to aid us in our infrastructure planning efforts. If you look at my cursor right here on the left side of the screen, this is an $8.4 million border-to-border project proposed with our partner Park Region. And over here on the east side of Otter Tail County is a $2.8 million East Otter Tail project. The topography of Otter Tail County, for those of you who aren't aware, is incredibly hilly and incredibly full of lakes. We have more lakes per square foot of anywhere in the United States, and for that reason it has made broadband an incredibly difficult thing to finance. And that is why we are so fortunate that we have a receptive state broadband office and really receptive leaders, including members on this call, to further this purpose. These two projects in combination are going to bring expedient mobile or fixed fiber broadband to 1,700 households, which equates to about 7% of our population, 323 total fiber miles, and we are very excited about it. But it didn't take, it took a lot of planning from a lot of individuals to orchestrate this. We started off in townships, visiting townships where we were able to raise $283,000 in municipal township support to leverage with philanthropic investment, which I'll get into in the next slide. The other component is social programming, and we are all aware of the updated NOFOs that came out of the BIL and are going to be administered by the Minnesota State Broadband Office and the NTIA. And so we are actively pursuing opportunities and creating project outlines to advance some of these social perspectives within our community, because we recognize that if you build this infrastructure, it is entirely useless if people don't know how to use it. So we've been working on setting up STEM workforce and training opportunities for children. We recognize that kids have more availability and access to the internet than ever, but we want to make sure that those priorities are used for creative things. We understand that our small businesses need to adapt to a modern economy, and this includes developments in search engine optimization, education regarding web development, CMS systems, and digital content marketing to make sure that they're prepared to handle the modern economy. And with this, I will hand my portion of the presentation over to my good colleague and friend, Patrick Gary with Redwood County and the American Connection Project.
Thanks, Carter, and thanks, Benya, for that very nice introduction. As Carter mentioned, I'm also a fellow serving in Redwood County, and today I'm excited to share my community's vision and our projects that we're currently working on with the task force here today. Just to provide a little background about our community, Redwood is largely an agrarian community located in southwestern Minnesota. And kind of the big fact that we have is Redwood County currently ranks 86 out of 87 counties in regards to broadband connectivity. So when I arrived to this community almost a year ago, I knew that I had my work cut out for me. We went from understanding the situation to working on building a vision, to working on developing community relationships, to getting creative with local dollars, as well as following and emulating innovative programs. And through this process, we developed a vision for a gig county where every home and every business was served with fiber. And Carter, did we lose our screen share here? It looks like he's coming back. There we go. So as you can see, I'll repeat that fact there for you. In just under a year, we have programs and projects developed or currently underway, or we're waiting to break ground to serve 86% of our county with fiber. And so that's outlined there with the blue coloring on the map. We wanted to take our community from 0 to 60, from last to leaders. The white territory on the map and the green circle in the south still represents the last few exchanges that we're working on to find funding and providers. We look to educate or to execute this vision of 86% in the next 5 years. And that brings us to our most exciting venture that we're currently working on now, which is our upcoming border-to-border grant project that we like to call the Cadillac Project. We're currently working alongside local provider Arvig to deploy fiber to 8 cities in our community, serving 30% of our county with fiber to the premise. And this is outlined, those communities are outlined in red dots on the map. And at the core of this is a generational investment to secure the future, the health, and vitality of the communities that we call home. This significant project maximizes our local dollars and our resources. And if you look at Redwood County by the numbers, it has a bit of a bleak future. We've lost a third of our population across the last 30 years. We're in economic distress. And if we continue on this path, we're just going to be another dying world statistic. But we look at broadband as a transformative technology to get us back on track and to place us in the driver's seat of our community's future. We look at this as an opportunity to be bold today so we can be bold tomorrow. And reflecting on this program and just this 1 year initiative that we've undergone, to work on these projects and to work in these communities and to work in rural Minnesota, to me, is really a privilege as a young person, to be impactful and to be a leader and to be supported by our great community partners and by our state organizations. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. We're going to have a big Q&A session at the end too. So really great. I'm sure there's a lot more follow-ups in here as well. But I couldn't help but just as you were talking, think even a year ago, in case you were wondering how we found Carter and Patrick, Carter is a graduate from Gustavus, and he made it very clear during his interview process that his whole senior thesis was on understanding and unpacking like telecommunications practices from the U.S. and China, and how can we think about infrastructure development in innovative ways. And then Patrick, too, a graduate from the University of Notre Dame, as an industrial design major, and had his senior thesis be about how can we create structures or inventions to make sure that farmers don't lose their lives from grain bin entrapment. So just a little bit of their background, and I can attest to that Carter is, in addition to being great at broadband infrastructure understanding, is also a very talented singer, and so our fellow retreats are also enlightened by his singing and guitar talents. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to our colleague, Santo Cruz. Thank you, Santo, for joining us as well. CentraCare is such a critical partner of this initiative as well, and excited to have you share also of why a healthcare company also invested in caring about the American Connection Corps.
Thank you, Benya, and thank you everyone for your attention today. And certainly, I can't outshine the fellows. They have all of the data, all of the knowledge, and all of the inspiration and energy that I think gives us all a bit of a charge. But what I will say is that if you were to go to Redwood Falls, and go to our brand new critical access hospital, especially at a time where critical access hospitals are closing throughout the country. In rural America, CentraCare is investing and has spent over $60 million building a brand new critical access hospital in the middle of the prairie, so to speak. But if you were to go to that infrastructure, you'd go to the entryway and you'd look above your head, you would see something really, really unique, really singular, so to speak, outside of a museum. You would see the only Lower Sioux community dugout canoe created since in modern times, basically. We worked with Chairman Larson in Lower Sioux community, which is right outside of Redwood, Minnesota, in Indian country, and collaborated with them not only in the blessing of the hospital, but also really trying to take on the disparities that exist in rural America in health. And one of the things that they wanted to do to symbolize the opening of the new hospital was to talk about how historically they remained connected and connectivity was so important. And the way they did that was being able to navigate the waterways, and they were master builders of dugout canoes. Since that time, in order to actually build that artifact for the hospital, they had to go to museums and actually study how to do it themselves again. They had lost that ability in their cultural memory to have someone available to create a dugout canoe to give this gift. So in spite of just the tragedy of losing that connectivity and that history, they went and regained that and rebuilt it in order to make this symbolic gift of how important it is to be connected, and how connectivity is really part of what gets us all to a better place, and how we find new solutions to new problems. And really, I think that that's where CentraCare and Land O'Lakes start. Seeing this issue really as a multifaceted issue that serves so many different lives and livelihoods, not just internet access or connectivity access, but rural health, access to rural mental health in terms of being able to do telepsychiatry. We can't do that and address the rural mental health crisis, particularly and disparately existing in farmers without that connectivity. We can't meet the workforce of tomorrow. CentraCare exists only in Greater Minnesota and serves exclusively Greater Minnesotans, and yet we have employees from 27 states throughout the country, which means that we see as a strategic need and we see ourselves as structurally dependent upon the connectivity of rural America. I think that when we look at the leadership of Land O'Lakes and their paradigm of really seeing this as kind of like the rural electrification movement for farmers back in FDR's time, we really have to take that type of vision that Beth Ford has led on and adopt that as our paradigm in this work. Because as we all know, once you get to that last mile, the economics just don't make sense anymore. You have to be doing it for some other reason. You have to be doing it for a moral, a cultural, an equity or access reason, because you're not going to have things pencil out anymore. And that's probably the best explanation of why we're putting $60 million into Redwood County, the least connected county or close to it in the entire state, at a time again where you're losing this infrastructure, because we realize that again there's a fundamental difference between infrastructure that exists in a metropolitan area where I lived for 18 years and have since moved back to greater Minnesota. And I grew up on a dairy farm, and there's something that I think we understand in greater Minnesota, which is this, that when you're in a metropolitan area, because things always pencil out, someone else will always kind of catch a rebound and rebuild something if it breaks. If you're in a metropolitan area and you see a dilapidated area, you kind of look at it and say, what's wrong? Who failed there? What happened? Something's got to give, and you have this expectation that someone ought to have fixed that, or someone ought to come in and fix it now. If you live in greater Minnesota, you do not have that level of judgment, because you know that things can just die from atrophy, as Patrick talked about earlier. And that is a very natural life cycle, unfortunately, in greater Minnesota, because they do not pencil out. They do not justify recapitalization. And so infrastructure broken in greater Minnesota is infrastructure lost for good. And so that's why we need this infusion. We need your time and attention, and we love the partnership with Land O'Lakes, certainly the fellows, and of course your time and attention as a task force of really bringing this last mile to greater Minnesotans, and of course rural America in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Santo. Beautifully put, and carries us into our, kind of last part of our presentation, is just talking about what next. How do we build on the momentum of Centric Care's involvement in Land O'Lakes, and very importantly, the great work of our fellows on the ground. So I want to pass it back to Gareth to talk through what are some of the thoughts that we've been talking about together about the future of AC, what learned as being critical, I think, for the expansion and success of ACC, both in Minnesota as well as across the nation.
Thanks again, Benya. And again, I want to give a special thanks out to this task force for just allowing us this forum to speak. As Benya mentioned, as we kind of move forward and as we kind of end our presentation, there are a few considerations that I would just want to want to make readily aware to everyone on this call. First and foremost, as Santo said, there's no outshining these fellows. I'm fortunate enough to work with Benya and Madison on an everyday, almost a weekly basis, right? Listening and hearing the stories and insights from all 50 of these fellows, and every single story is always encouraging. I'm enlightened, and I'm also keenly aware that I just probably wasn't that amazing of a young adult compared to some of the amazing work that these fellows are actually doing. So it's also optimistic as well. But in all seriousness, for this task force, models like the ACC, where we really focus on identifying community-focused capacity building, should be really prioritized as this committee and as this administration continues to move forward through implementation. This model, sending individuals from now all walks of life back into their hometown, back into these communities, both rural and metropolitan, to really serve as those entrepreneurial engines, right, that really facilitate and allow this type of rural and community vitalization is just amazing. And I would just ask that this continue to be prioritized and really leveraged and utilized as this committee continues to move forward with funding. My second point, and I'll let Benya take the last, is that to really close this last file, we have to acknowledge that every community has their own set of unique and distinct challenges. For example, I am a kid from rural Georgia. My community in Macon, Georgia, that has approximately 60,000 people, with, of course, a city council, a chamber of commerce, and probably some other economic opportunity councils, probably doesn't have the same type of needs and requirements as a community even 60 miles down the road. And I'm sure the same thing can be said for Minnesota. So as we kind of make sure and we acknowledge that each county, each community has their own unique set of challenges, we should be careful not to create and not necessarily create unnecessarily rigid structured programs, but rather prioritize working to create programs with a lot more flexibility that really allows communities and towns to really address their respective and unique broadband challenges present within those specific households and families. Again, I want to thank this committee. I want to thank this committee for the time to be able to share. I want to thank these fellows, and I want to thank Santo for also sharing these great insights too. And I look forward to sharing more and more success metrics and great stories with you all in the future.
Great, thanks, Gareth. And let me close first by reiterating that last point. I live in Waseca. My dad's family traces back to 6 generations here, and I'm excited also that this upcoming year, Waseca County will be getting an ACC fellow, and Teresa can attest to this too. It really does take leadership to get this job done, and it takes capacity builders. And here in Waseca, our solution is a hybrid of fixed wireless and fiber, and we have the leadership from our county, and now with our incoming ACC fellow to really push this forward and make sure we are prepared in ways that we haven't always been in the past to go after this historic level of funding opportunities. So first, just want to reiterate and emphasize that focus on capacity building, flexibility, and right-sized solutions that are driven by and led by the local community. As now transitioning to the programmatic side, we have been at Lead for America also just so inspired by the work that our fellows have done. Again, this was a pilot initiative. It's a 2-year pilot, so we're going into year 2 of the pilot, but are moving into this year with a few adjustments, one of them being we have made ACC now its own separate program outside of our standard hometown fellowship program, which allows us also this ability to expand and diversify the incredible talent we're able to bring into the program. So as we go into year 2, in fact, we'll have a few placements that will be on the full kind of intergenerational scope. So we've got outstanding recent graduates like Pat and Carter, and we'll also have the wisdom of a recent county technology officer who just retired, now joining into the ACC to really roll up her sleeves and deliver for what will be Koochiching County up in northern Minnesota. So excited to see the diversity of this program grow. And secondly, also, we've been able also to work very closely with states. And so thank you for bringing us here. I want to also offer a few examples of what that kind of state collaboration has looked like. And in Oregon and Ohio, we received planning grants from their state service commissions. I'm happy to say here in Minnesota, ServMN is also one of our funders and partners. So our fellows are also at the same time AmeriCorps members and are able to emulate what national service can do for a community. And in Oregon, for example, they provided us a planning grant to say, how can you expand the ACC program from the 2 fellows in Oregon that we had to eventually perhaps one embedded into every county. So we're excited to see how we can work with state broadband offices, state service commissions, as well as the dedication of philanthropic and corporate partners, both within this state as well as nationally. Thanks again to the leadership of Land O'Lakes and Center Care for helping us build this model and be advocates for the Boots on the Ground initiative. So with that, thank you for having us. And I think we have about 15 minutes of Q&A. So I see there's a few hands. Teddy, let me know if you'd like me to call on folks here, or if you would like to facilitate this.
No, I'll just call in folks, and I'll let you answer the questions. So Bernadine is first.
Thank you so much, Benya and Patrick and Carter. We would be remiss as a task force when we're having you here with us today to not respond to Gareth's call to us to use this as a model. And Gareth, I wanted to mention in their annual report last year was a recommendation that the ACC be replicated and funded, including using public dollars. So we, regrettably, that recommendation wasn't acted on, but I think we have good precedent and an opportunity to double down on that messaging based on the examples that you've brought to us. So thanks again for your leadership, and you guys should all know that you have fans here on the task force, and we've already seen you and recommended this model to the state as a way forward.
Thank you, Bernadine. Steve Georgie.
I want to thank the group for the presentation. It's very informative. I'm really pleased to hear the emphasis on the recognition that there's a lack of capacity in small rural Minnesota communities. That's been the struggle, I think, from the Rams' perspective up on the Iron Range, that so many of our townships simply do not have the capacities to pursue grants, to reach out and communicate within their townships and try and secure funding and beat for broadband and grant opportunities. And, not just townships, but small communities also. And I live in one, and they don't know what a gig city is, let alone a big county. I was also curious, Patrick, in Redwood County, you talked about the Cadillac plan with a $4.4 million investment. Was that county community funds, or is that the total cost for the project?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. That the 4.4 million represents our total project cost there, and that's in cooperation with Orvig as well. They contributed. But those funds from the county, actually, they took probably about 85% of our American Rescue Plan dollars went towards funding this project. And so for our community, it was a significant investment, and our County Board of Commissioners really put an emphasis that, we're tight on funds, like a lot of rural communities are. We don't have money sitting around. And so they said, you got to get as scrappy as you can with these dollars until, nothing's left. And we were able to kind of assemble everything together and hit those 8 cities all in one project. So we're very excited and very, we're very excited about it. So thank you.
Thank you.
And if I can add to that too, Patrick did an extraordinary job of speaking and building relationships with every single one of those commissioners, and then all the levels of connections of people that they have relationships with as their constituents too. And so I can attest that the work is very human. Pat and I have had a few phone calls where I'm sure maybe you were at points of pulling your hair out, and where the vote wasn't totally looking in your favor. But I think your work, your service, Pat, really speaks to the human and relational nature of this work, and the cultural narrative shift that also needs to happen. And again, doing it from a place that in many ways can only be really locally led, and through that groundwork of relationships. I myself, on the day of this county vote, was on a bus on a farm tour with the American Farm Bureau, and I knew Pat had done his work well when the guide of our bus was telling everybody about this vote, this commissioner vote that was taking place. And I just thought, when does anyone actually know when county commissioner votes take place? And yet with this one issue, you had gotten this whole bus of 40 people rallying as the vote was taking place. So Congratulations, Pat.
That's awesome. Other questions? While we wait for hands to go up or somebody coming off mute, Santo, I do have a question for you. So obviously when COVID started, there was a huge rush to start using telehealth, right? Like compared to what it was before the pandemic. Have you seen that sort of drop off now that sort of things are opening up again, or is that now, because people are used to using telehealth, is that now becoming more of a standard?
It's definitely dropped off to an extent, but it has leveled off at higher than baseline. One of the things that through the leadership of the American Connection Project with our American Connection Coalition with Land O'Lakes, we were kind of one of the first 5 members, and early on, before we got to over 100 across the country, there was this awareness around COVID that we needed to really evaluate telehealth in particular and policy, and actually have a policy group that I sit on nationwide that does work around that. And really there's 3 pillars to being able to provide telehealth, not just in greater Minnesota, but in rural America. And the first pillar is you need obviously the broadband connectivity. You need to be able actually to reach folks. The second was that you needed the regulatory framework to allow it, to grant it permission, which is currently kind of lurching forward about 90 days at a time. The only service that you could do through telehealth prior to the pandemic was telepsychiatry and telestroke. Everything else that you're talking about, your visits, the dermatology, you name it, that all is only legal to do now under the regulatory because of the public health emergency being extended at the federal level. And the third thing you needed was actually be able to be reimbursed. So you could legally do it, but you couldn't bill Medicare, Medicaid, or the commercial payers for it. So we had all 3 things line up for the very first time in the United States over these past 2 years. It is very difficult for me to see that genie going back into the bottle. Nevertheless, we have those 3 problems still staring us in the face as we did 3 years ago. We have connectivity issues. We haven't codified the regulatory framework that allowed for the flexibility. And in some part, the reimbursement model for that is tied to being able to do it legally. So we've definitely seen an uptick. We know that we need to do better. And we know that some of the losses, quite frankly, are just folks going back to usual or back to normal, but there's still access issues for folks that we need to reach anyway to basically address those disparities that we know exist so prevalently in rural Minnesota, where statistically folks are older, poorer, and sicker than their metro counterparts.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And 2 thoughts on that one. Number one, I think this is something for the task force to consider, maybe even recommendations for this year. If there are some things from a regulatory policy standpoint, specifically at the state level, is there something we could recommend? Because I mean, I think that area of telehealth is huge if people have the ability to take advantage of it and there's no barriers in the way. Secondly, is I think that's also a great focus for the ACC, because I'm sure that there's some barriers, but then there's the adoption issue where people actually feel comfortable getting on a tablet, getting on a phone, and seeing a doctor. So it's something that we could push on as well. So thank you for that update.
I would welcome that perspective and that support. I think it's spot on.
Other questions, comments from the task force members for this group? All right, I'm not seeing any hands up. So with that, Benya, Carter, Patrick, Gareth, and Santo, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I mean, I think Bernadine and Teresa said it earlier. I mean, this reinforces why we do this, even why we're on this task force when we serve on it. This is the proof point, right? So we really do appreciate you coming on and giving us an update, and I'm sure it won't be the last time we'll be talking to you. So you might be a standing guest in our meetings, maybe once or twice a year.
You know how to find me. So
We'll
Thank you for the opportunity, guys.
Yeah, we'll have updates on your K through 12 STEM curriculum work there, Carter. So looking forward to seeing that in your year 2. Thank you so much for having us, everyone,
Great.
and also for the recommendation this past year as well. Thank you for your support.
Great. No, thank you. Okay, hopefully everybody found that to be reinvigorating as well as very informative. I'm glad to have had that on the agenda. Well, like I said, I think we'll have them more often because I think some of these updates, if anything, they give us more encouragement and more fuel to be able to continue to push this forward. So with that, switching gears now, we just want to do a quick update on the subgroups. Just nothing big, just more kind of an update how the meetings have gone, if there's been a meeting, if there's anything else the task force needs to be aware of, etc. And obviously, I think starting, we're going to have Scott on, not at the task force as well as the subgroup. So some of the putting some of our thoughts to paper will start soon. But with that, just wanted to turn over to the affordability and adoption subgroup for a quick update.
Great. I'll take the lead, and then Mark can fill in anything I miss. We haven't met since the last time all of us got together, but we did communicate and talk about a schedule. We've got a regular meeting schedule set up on the third Tuesday of each month. Carol's gonna set up our Teams meetings and stuff. So our first meeting is gonna actually be next Tuesday on the 19th. I have a couple of agenda items I've already sketched out, and we've chatted a little bit about in our last get together. I think this conversation here today gives us a couple more. How can we support and amplify the ACP work? Maybe we should have some conversation about that. How can we best support, these young people and everything they're doing with the ACC, digital equity? These are some of the topics that we're going to be talking about next Tuesday. Anything else, Mark?
No, thanks, Yvonne. I think, and I think too, even just hearing the affordability or affordable connectivity program information, I think there's some things we can talk about with that too. So this was an excellent meeting to generate some ideas at our group that we can bring back next time.
Great, thank you. And I know that we had a recommendation last year on this whole adoption piece, right? Especially kind of using this model. But there was so much focus on the funding, right? Because the funding hadn't happened, and without that, you don't get started. I think now that we're beyond the funding piece, and okay, we've got to get it out. And even this group today was interesting to see, even getting the funding out and getting the project started, there's a lot of work there to actually make it a reality. So, so I think we can put more weight on some of those recommendations, this time around. Okay, great. Thank you for that update. Next one is the funding, mapping, and usage subgroup update. Steve, I believe you're up for that one. Oh, I see you talking, Steve, but I can't hear you. I don't know if it's me.
How about now? Better?
Oh yeah, there we go. Yep.
It's the double mute thing going on. So a few of us were able to get together and have some discussions about what we might want to talk about or hear about. Steve took some of that, and Steve Georgie, and I noticed already some of the information that we had asked for, Diane provided in her update today. So some of it's already produced a result here. One of the other issues or questions, I guess, is mapping. As far as how do people go about challenging a map in the right way, whether that's the state level map, and Diane has a procedure that she provided me that they clearly have something out there ready to go, but also on the federal side, and what resource might there be for us to hear from or get directions from on how do individuals challenge something, how do ISPs challenge something, any of the stakeholders when they have some concern with mapping. And it's because it does come up so often. It's come up, every year I've sat in on this thing or been a part of it. So Diane clearly has, again, answers ready to go on some of this. And if it's not packaged in a way that we can get out and present, that might be something I would use with my members, townships, to get out there and so they know what they can do, but also so other groups can use that as a resource if it's not already available as a resource. And then just the federal side, what are we looking at for that? How do they want to see those kind of questions about mapping? And then the other subject was there's so many different programs. What's the lay of the land with all of these programs? What's started, what's completed, what's still in process? How do they relate to each other? Even for those of us who hear this regularly, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of programs. There's a lot of acronyms. There's a lot of players. So almost a map of what's out there, I think might be useful not only for us, but for individuals, communities. Again, my townships would be probably interested to know where can they go to look for this stuff? Who can they partner with? What kind of money might they be able to help with or leverage? So did I miss anything, Brian, Steve?
Nope, you did a good job, Steve.
Thank you.
Bernadine, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Steve, for that. Really support and applaud the idea about the what's out there thing. And I'm reminded a couple years ago, maybe it was as long ago as actually 2008, when we had the ARA money in the state. The Governor's Broadband Task Force at that time included in their annual report kind of an update on how those funds had been utilized in the state. And I know it's early in the year, but maybe as we sort of start thinking, as we think towards our annual report, maybe that'd be something for us to consider mapping in some way or document in some way. How has Minnesota participated in, what is the map of our federal participation and other programming look like? So just throwing out there to think about in terms of documenting in our report. Thanks.
Yep.
Other questions for Steve and the team, or comments from anyone else? All right. Steve, thank you for that update. It looks like we're making good progress there, and look forward to getting the writers kind of on the group itself, and then start to formulate some of the thoughts. And again, to both subgroups, as we continue to have our meetings, if you have certain speakers that you think of as you kind of do discussions that you think we should be bringing forward for the larger task force to hear, please reach out to myself or Diane, and we'll be happy to arrange kind of contacting that individual and getting them set up, et cetera. But yeah, that'll be good as you have more discussions in the subgroups, and yeah, it'd be good to hear from this organization or this individual. Happy to be able to accommodate that. Okay. All right. The last agenda item before we open it up to public comments and other business from my end is really on the letter to the Public Utilities Commission. I sent that to you, I believe, earlier this week or last week, somewhere in there. I did have a few folks comment, but nothing substantive to make sure any changes from the one you received from myself by email. But I just wanted to make sure again. There's a few folks I got together to help put together the letter, but just wanted to I'll share it on my screen, and then wanted to see if anybody had any thoughts or changes that we need to make to this letter from the way you received it from myself, from my email. And again, once we maybe, if we need to have a discussion, we can. And then the easiest thing would be, before I send this letter out, is to have a vote on it to see if everybody's aligned on sending this letter out or not. So, all right, I'm not going to share anymore because I can't see whose hand goes up when I'm sharing. I'm happy to put it back up again if we need to. But any questions, comments based on what you've read or discussions that we need to have on this letter before we send it out? Bernadine? Oh, you're on mute, Bernadine.
Sorry, I just wanted to note the PUC is meeting tomorrow, so it'd be excellent for us to get this letter sent today. Because the question that we're addressing in the letter, they're addressing tomorrow in the public hearing.
Thank you, Bernadine. Steve Georgie? Steve, you're on mute.
Excuse me. I shared an article that indicates that there are 4 other states that have denied LTE this privilege in their state, and it just seems that we just keep watching the clock tick and the months go by. with nothing happening. It also seems that the FCC is likely not to ever issue funding to them, possibly Starlink and one other large recipient of the RDOF auction. And by doing so, that avoids any challenges to the decision. But the states that are being negatively impacted are in the meantime just sitting there struggling with how to move forward. So I think the letter is critically important for us. I agree with Bernadine, we should try and get it out today.
Steve, Mark Johnson?
Yeah, Teddy, if you need a motion to distribute or to send this letter, I would make such a motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. Now we have to go person by person to ask this, but I know we have a few folks that are not on, so I'll need to follow up with Teresa and Jim and others. But let me ask this, is there anybody on the task force that is opposed to sending this letter? I'm still here, I'm just making sure we get plenty of time for response. Okay. So I'm not hearing any, so what we'll do is I will follow up with Brian, go ahead.
Thanks, Teddy. I am not opposed to it, but I would just like the minutes to reflect that I abstained, being that I'm part of the Minnesota Rural Electric Association and part of the initiative.
Yeah, no, thanks, Brian, and you noted that before, so we'll make sure we note that down. Okay, and then for the task force members that are not on, I will follow up with them and give them the opportunity to either abstain, as Brian did, or to vote against if that's what they choose to do so. So, and with that, we'll try to get the letter out as soon as I can. It's going to be depending on two things. One is getting the response back from the task force members that are not here, and then the second one is getting the email addresses of the Public Utility Commission and making sure we can get it to them in a timely fashion. So, but I know the hearing is tomorrow, but I'm sure there'll be not the one and done. So, but again, we'll strive very hard to get that out as quickly as possible. Okay. All right. So with that finished, now I would open it up to any other. Let's do the sort of other business from any task force members at the moment. You can raise your hand, and if there's things that we need to consider or talk about, that would be a good time to do so. Steve, Steve George, I saw your hand go up quickly. Was there?
Yeah, Teddy. You mentioned earlier that the funding is now out there, and so we can move on. And I have to agree that we did get some funding. I think Diane indicated that the $70 million is coming from the Jobs Act or the Infrastructure Act, Public Service Act is available. But, in my mind, Minnesota is still losing ground across the country to other states and what's going on. And I'm very concerned about how the Office of Broadband is going to hopefully construct a 5-year plan moving forward and who's going to be involved with that. And I'm looking at an article here about the state of Maryland. They just released $127.6 million in broadband grants. And the governor stated that last summer we supercharged our broadband investment with the launch of Connect Maryland for a total new investment of $400 million for the expansion of broadband access and to address the digital divide for everyone all across our state. As a result of these efforts, broadband is now available to well over 95% of Marylanders. And a new national survey ranked Maryland as the most improved state in America for business, and they cited our progress on infrastructure and broadband as part of that success. I just, you know, I think we really have to revisit the vision and connect with the governor, the legislative leaders. We've got to secure federal funds, and we've got to start thinking bigger if we're actually going to accomplish something. And, you know, we're fortunate to have Redwood County take an initiative, get something done in their county. Stuff like that is happening even without the Office of Broadband border-to-border grant. That's just simply amazing. But if we don't think bigger and actually go after some significant federal funds and state funds, you know, how long is it going to be before we are truly connected in Minnesota? So I hope people on the task force are not comfortable with what happened in the last session. The governor was sitting on $1.1 billion of ARPA funds that have been allocated for broadband, and they weren't. There wasn't even a conversation about it. So I'm here to say we've got to do better. So I don't want that conversation to be forgotten. Thank you.
No, Steve, I think that's a good point. But what I would say is that would be, I mean, the subgroup of funding, mapping, and that one of the subgroups, that'd be a great topic to bring up there. And, you know, what are some thoughts, things we should be thinking about and doing, and that's how we can put it into the recommendation. I would encourage you to bring it up and into that discussion. I think that would be helpful. Thank you for those comments. Others from the task force? I'm not seeing any hands up. Anybody else that's on the call right now, not on the task force, but wants to make a statement? I'm not hearing anybody, or I'm not seeing anything on Teams. Well, the very last thing before we close off, the governor did sign the executive order I believe it was a couple of weeks ago, and it was actually at a dairy farm, which was super interesting. So we took some pictures, and you know, in closing, I just wanted to make sure this was the actual document, that was the actual official signing. Obviously, you see the governor there and the lieutenant governor. And then also, you know, Steve, Mark, myself, and Bernadine also had the opportunity to be there. So it was very exciting to be there. I obviously didn't realize, should have looked better and known I was going to a dairy farm, because I know exactly how to dress for a dairy farm, but not that day. But it was a lot of fun to be there. I know all the paperwork and all that was done in advance, and the public announcement was done. It's just fun to be there, and really even hearing from the governor reinforced the fact that, you know, broadband is kind of vital to what we need. And then the dairy producer also talked about his operation and how he's reliant on technology, and without that, you know, whether it's the dairy operation or whether it's his row crop operation, that would not be a possibility. So good to see that even the ag productivity, in addition to the telehealth and the educational piece that we talked about in the past, are critical to this. So again, just wanted to share that on sort of an ending on a good note. It was fun to be there. And yep, I agree with you, Steve. There's a lot more way to go than the $95 million to close the $1.3 billion gap, or at least half of that. But you know, it's good to at least the dollars are out, and things that we saw earlier in Redwood County, for example, starting to figure out how to take advantage of that. Obviously, it's not just a one and done. We got to, you know, hopefully the dollars available next year are even bigger. So that's something we'll have to push for. So with that, I want to thank everybody for their engagement. Thank you for your time. Our next meeting is in August. I don't have all the details now, but we'll try to see if we can make the next meeting a face-to-face meeting, which I don't think we've met since the very first meeting 2.5, 3 years ago almost. So we'll try to see how we can try to coordinate that. I can't promise anything, but more details to come by email, and we'll see if we can get a chance to get together and maybe spend some time together too. All right. Thank you, everyone.